everything off, well, that's fantastic. Most of you will be somewhere in between. Most of you will be somewhere in between those two things. The anticipation is that you'll look at tomorrow's quiz. You'll at least understand all the questions. You'll be able to answer most of them. There'll be a few you go, I remember talking about that. If you're in that category, yeah, you should be fine. As long as it doesn't look like something you don't have between your ears at all. Okay, on Canvas, in this class, all I really use Canvas for is as a repository of documents. So there are no like quizzes out of Canvas or anything like that in this class. It's just, after we take a quiz, for example, I put it in Canvas so you can access it to study from and whatnot. There are only two things that are on our Canvas page now. I assume everyone knows how to get into Canvas, how to access the course. If you don't, come and see me and we'll make sure. Everything that I'm going to put in here, like my little introduction, to the left is where you find quizzes, tests, labs, etc. So all you have to do is go to the assignments tab. I won't put anything anywhere other than in the assignments tab. The only things I have in there now are the syllabus, and then down here, green chemistry. I'm not going to go to the green chemistry document. You should open it and read it. It basically talks about what it talks about. Read it. You guys can read it. We'll talk about it some more in lab. But you guys can read syllabi too, so I don't want to spend too much time here. Syllabus. But let's go over the highlights. This is a year-long course. This is the first quarter of it. Most of you, for whatever you're intending to do with your lives, are going to need all 3 quarters. Some of you, maybe not, depending on where you're headed. It assumes that you've had through Chemistry 163. If that is not you, there's a potential problem. You may want to come talk to me. A couple of you have emailed me about not having had 163. I'll give you my stock response. Prerequisites are there for your benefit, not mine. It's your life, not mine. I'm here to help you with your life, not dictate it. Anyone that wants to take this class, as far as I'm concerned, is welcome. It's not a course that fills. We don't have to turn anybody away. So I don't have to worry about that issue. So everyone's welcome. But if you haven't had through 163, there are going to be some things I'm going to assume you've been exposed to that you have not been exposed to, and that's on you to fill in that gap as needed. So there's that. Okay, you guys know when and where we meet because you're here, good for you. On lab, that corner room there is your organic chemistry lab. Fall quarter is beautiful for us. We are the only people in that lab fall quarter. We rule, we totally dominate. Winter quarter and spring quarter, we have to share it with others, which is going to be surprisingly burdensome after having spent a quarter without having to share it with anybody. For example, if you don't finish a particular procedure, you can kind of leave it set up and come back the next time and not have to worry about anyone messing with your stuff. Whereas winter and spring quarter, you have to put everything away. Come back next week, set everything back up, that sort of thing. We have a large enough class this year that we have the 2 lab sections, Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. I don't really care which of those 2 lab sections you are registered for. You're welcome to play in either or both. So if you're registered for Tuesday, but something has come up in your life that you'd rather do that Tuesday afternoon, go do it. Come to Thursday lab, get your work done, fine. If you're finding yourself a little behind in lab, feel free to come in Tuesday and Thursday a given week to play and catch yourself up. As you'll find out, I will be giving you labs with relatively generous due dates. I have the first lab here. It's not due for like 3 weeks or something like that. I think you have 2 full weeks to play in lab. It shouldn't take anywhere near that much time. It would be a mistake, due date October 7th, it would be a mistake for you to wait right before the due date to do the lab, because the next lab will be coming soon. You will be more or less on your own within the due dates I prescribe to get the work done in time. You will find that you can slack off a given week if you want to, never recommended. But then you will have to spend the next week working doubly hard to catch yourself up. Another thing about organic lab that's going to be different from your Gen Chem experience. In Gen Chem, everyone shows up, spend a couple hours, you do the lab. At the end of 2 hours, maybe you have some good data, maybe you don't. If you don't have good data, that's okay. You go home, you write up your lab, you say what should have happened, and everyone's happy. I'm not knocking that. That's the way I run Gen Chem too. But there comes a time when knowing what was supposed to have happened is not quite good enough. It needs to have happened. So that's the biggest reason why I give relatively generous due dates. If you go in, this first lab is a purification lab. If you go in and are unsuccessful at purifying the compound that I give you, well, do it again. So you are successful at purifying the compound. Sometimes the reason for not being successful is poor technique on your part. Sometimes the reason for not being successful is someone next to you knocked over your stuff. Whatever, the lab is going to require that you present to me in a vial a purified sample of the compound, not just that you can write on paper how that purification should have happened and why it didn't. So that's going to be one difference that you'll find. I try to treat this lab as close to a professional situation as I can, realizing that we still have school sorts of limitations. Okay, no partners in lab. Everyone does their own lab work, no lab partners. That is not to say that collaboration is discouraged. Collaboration is highly encouraged. I very strongly recommend that you talk it up in lab and look over somebody's shoulder if they seem to know what they're doing. But everyone does their own individual lab work, submits their own individual stuff. Okay, instructor Ted Wood, that's me, yay. I do prefer to be called by my first name, Ted. If you would rather call me something else, you are welcome to do so. My office is where the chemistry and biology people keep their offices. Those are the office hours. Every day this class meets the hour before the class with an office hour. On Mondays and Wednesdays, I have a Chemistry 100 class that comes into this room as soon as you guys leave. So I'm unavailable after class on Mondays and Wednesdays. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm obviously available in the lab. And if you're not working in lab and you want to come in and ask some questions, by all means, come in the lab. I'm going to be there all afternoon, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Here's something that I do not have on the syllabus because I just recently decided to do it. The Wednesday office hours, both the one at 11 and the one after my Chem 100 class starting at 2:10, I'm going to hold out here in the Chemistry Commons area. And I'm going to make everyone come visit me at some point during the course of the quarter. I would say the sooner the better, but don't panic about it. So a Wednesday office hour at 11 or after my Chem 100 class, come visit me. Be hanging out in the Chemistry Commons. I'm going to be there all quarter on Wednesdays. The other office hours will be held in my office. If the Wednesday office hours, neither of those 2 hours on Wednesday fits into your schedule, you can't come and visit me, come and see me sometime within the next week or so. And we'll work something out some other time when you can come visit me in the Chemistry Commons area. I don't know, 5:30 after lab one day, something, whatever we can work out. Okay, the text is by Solomon's. Here it is, yay. This edition is, several years old, so should be used copies floating around. Not that you necessarily need to know this, but one of the interesting things about this text is Solomon's. There was a time, for example, when I was in your shoes, there was a time when there was one organic chemistry text used literally the world over. The authors were a couple of guys named Morrison and Boyd. Anywhere literally on the planet where there was a year-long organic chemistry class, that was the text that was used. Talk to anyone, certainly my age, anywhere from 15 years younger than me to 15 years older than me, ask them what text they used in their organic chemistry class. I guarantee they're going to say Morrison and Boyd text. The first person to challenge that monopoly was Graham Solomons, professor at the University of South Florida. Morrison and Boyd took him to court, saying that basically he's just copying our text, plagiarizing too much from our text. Solomon's defense was, hey, it's organic chemistry. Of course, a lot of it is going to look the same. It's the same topic. The courts ruled in Solomon's favor, and the floodgates opened, and now there's bazillions of organic chemistry textbooks out there. Anyway, I have respect for Solomon's for having been the person that broke up the Morrison and Boyd monopoly. That's not the reason why, well, maybe it's a small part of the reason, why I utilize this text. The second author here, a guy named Craig Freely, he's a professor of organic chemistry at PLU. Some of you may end up transferring to PLU. You'll meet Craig, really nice guy. The way he ended up becoming an author is he didn't like the spectroscopy section of the Solomon's text. So he wrote Solomon's a long letter explaining why he didn't like the spectroscopy section. Solomon's wrote back saying, okay, you rewrite it. And so Freely did, and Solomon put him as a co-author. I have no idea who Scott Snyder is. Anyway, this is the text. I also have on there the Organic Chem Lab Survival Manual by Zubrick. It's a techniques manual. It just describes how to do stuff in lab. I don't care what edition you use. Did I even put an edition down there? I didn't even put an edition on there because it doesn't matter. I don't even know what the current edition is. Any edition of the Zubrick manual will work just fine. Molecular model set. There's a model set that's sold in the bookstore. That's a great one. I don't care if you use that one specifically, but you're going to want a model set. Maybe not first couple of weeks, but come around week 3 or 4, you're going to want a model set. Unless you're some three-dimensional genius, you're going to want a model set. Make sure if you don't get the one in the bookstore, you get one that says organic on it somewhere. Basically, that will assure that there are enough carbon atoms in there. If it doesn't say organic, there won't be enough carbon atoms in that box. And a laboratory notebook. I strongly recommend that you use the ones that automatically make a copy. Like if you took your Gen Chem here at Pierce, you used there. And yes, by all means, if you haven't used up that notebook, that's good to go for organic. Don't buy a fresh new notebook just for this class. That makes no sense. So there's that. Grading, I'm a straight points guy. I add up your points, divide by the number possible. That's your grade. I'll show you the grading scale in a bit. I've hereby eliminated the I didn't know there was a test that day excuse, because there they are. We're going to have 3 tests on those days. Yay. We're going to have several in-class quizzes on those days. There they are. There's individual quizzes. Going back up under quizzes, I point out there's going to be individual and group quizzes. I don't have the group quizzes listed on here because they can come at any time. You'll figure out, I tend to have a little pattern, you'll figure it out quickly enough as far as the group quizzes go. But they can come at any time, but again, group quizzes are full cheating allowed affairs. For group quizzes, let me tell you right now, I'll pick the groups. I don't play any psychological games, when I put good students with other good students or any, thing like that. I'm not convinced that any of that means anything, quite frankly. What I am convinced means a lot is mixing you up as best as I can so you get to work with as many different people in this class as often as possible. What I will do for the first group quiz tomorrow is I'll take the first 3 names off the roster, you're a group, the next 3, you're a group, and so on. What I will do for the second group quiz is simply look at the first group quiz and make sure you're with somebody different. That's all I do. For the third one, I look at the second one and make sure you don't repeat anybody you had there. That's it. Okay, the lab. Already talked about it a little bit. A couple lab quizzes on those days. Don't worry about them yet. More about them when they come. Additional activities, that's a weenie category. This is a legal document, syllabi are. I can't ask you to do anything that isn't in the syllabus. So if I have a category that says I can ask you to do anything I want, I can legally ask you to do anything I want because it's in the syllabus. I don't anticipate any additional activities, but you never know how a quarter is going to go. The final exam is when the college says final exam is supposed to be for this class. Makeups. Makeups are a hassle. Everybody hates makeups. I hate makeups. You hate makeups. So let's not do makeups to the extent possible. I certainly don't want your life to be ruined because of an unavoidable conflict that requires a makeup. So let me know ahead of time. We'll talk about it. None of this, if you come up to me after the fact, Ted, I missed the quiz, what can I do about it? The answer will be nothing. You let me know ahead of time. Now if you wake up sick and you can't come in, a quick email letting me know that you're too sick to come in suffices as letting me know ahead of time. But none of this coming up to me after the fact stuff. That won't fly. Okay, late work, 10% penalty per day late. About the only thing that could really be late in this class is the lab report. Problems, I'll show you where they are in a bit. Assigned for each part of the course. This is, reading and homework. I don't collect the homework, I don't grade the homework. It is not directly a part of your grade. It is for your intellectual enjoyment. The assumption is that you can deal with the issues raised in the homework questions. I write the quizzes and tests based on that assumption. If you can't deal with those, if you look at it and say, "Ooh, I don't know what's going on," by all means ask. It's perfectly legitimate in class. You go, "Hey Ted, can you go over problem number such and such?" I'll be happy to do it in class. Absolutely. Don't cheat, only jerks cheat. If you're special needs, you probably know what to do. There's reasonable accommodations for faith conscience is a new state law. Read that, see if it applies to you. We all know teachers are underpaid, keep those bribes coming. This is a list of topics for the course. I don't necessarily expect these to mean much to you at this point. I primarily put them on the syllabus if someone asks you somewhere, "Hey, what'd you cover in 261 down at Pierce?" The stuff on this paper, that's what we covered. At the end of the course, all these things should mean a whole lot to you. Okay, here's the homework. For the first test, we'll be going over the first 4 chapters in the book. Everything in the first 4 chapters, all sections are important to us. I have core problems and additional problems. The problems in the text, there are questions embedded within the text. Typical for textbooks, after discussing some stuff, there'll be a few questions about that. And then there are a list of questions at the end of each chapter. The core problems are the ones embedded in the text. The additional problems here are the relevant ones at the end of the text. All the concepts that you need for success are covered by the core problems But if you want additional work, look at what additional means. There's additional work. So if you're satisfied with a C, there you go. If you want an A, there you go. And note that I don't give you a specific day. Chapter 1 stuff should be done by this day. We'll be doing, you'll be able to see where we are in class as we move along. Pace yourselves appropriately. It's up to you how you personally pace. I don't feel that I should be dictating that. Maybe in a Chem 100 class I would, but in a Chem 261 class, it seems unnecessary. At least I hope it's unnecessary. Proceed how you proceed. What else we got on here? I don't think we have anything else other than, oh, okay. Here's stuff that should be in your lab notebook. For the most part, what you will be submitting to me is a copy of your lab notebook, not a formal lab write-up. We will do some formal lab write-ups in here. I will be very explicit. We are doing a formal lab write-up with this lab. If I don't say so, what you'll be submitting to me is a copy of your laboratory notebook. So if you have the kind of laboratory notebook that automatically makes a duplicate, there you go, we're about to duplicate, give that to me. If you don't have that, I don't know, Xerox it or something. But don't ever give me the original. The original is yours. Give me a copy. And these are things that should be in there. It should all make sense to you. There's nothing that I have in here that I'm sure wasn't required. Maybe it was slightly different verbiage as to titles or something that wasn't required in your Gen Chem class. If you're at all unsure of what should be submitted, it's perfectly legitimate. Before you submit it, Ted, take a look at this. Is this cool? Should I be adding something? I'll be happy to give you pre-submission feedback on your lab stuff. And some notes that probably were part of what was presented to you in Gen Chem. If any of that doesn't make sense, ask me about it. Here's the grading scale. Fairly traditional. Pierce is a decimal grading school. So we don't really give A's, B's, C's, and D's, but the decimals correspond to those grades. The A category is a standard 90 to 100, B in the 80s. C's I drop down to 65, D's I drop down to 50. And that's that. Preguntas?
Do you test off of your lectures or off of the textbook more?
Change the word or to and there's your answer. All of the above is fair game. Having said that, I think most of you will end up reaching the conclusion that what goes on in lecture is the most important thing. Any other questions? Okay. Just because it's day one doesn't mean we can't do stuff. Let's do stuff. This is a course in organic chemistry. Do we even know what that is? Actually, no. But we'll touch on that. A lot of people are under the impression that organic chemistry is the chemistry of life. Incorrect, though not irrelevant. It's all about carbon. Organic chemistry is the chemistry compounds that contain carbon. If it's got carbon in there, it's an organic compound. If carbon's not there, it's not an organic compound. There you go. The term organic is a bit unfortunate. The term organic has at least 3 distinct meanings that I'm aware of. One of them is we refer to things as being organic that do have something to do with life. The other is in the agricultural sense, where we talk about growing foods organically. And that means growing foods in the absence of synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. All of which, by the way, are organic compounds. Those pesticides and fertilizers that you can't use in organic gardening are all organic compounds, which is the third definition of organic, this, compounds containing carbon. And those 3 definitions are not unrelated, but are distinctly different. Okay, so the obvious question, I think, what's so dang special about carbon? You guys can go on and get your PhDs in chemistry, which I'm sure most of you will. You will never take a course based on the compounds of only one element other than this course based on the compounds of just carbon. Why is carbon so special?
You make 4 bonds. You make 4 bonds.
Okay, it can make 4 bonds. What's so special about that? What's wrong with 3? Or 2 or 1 or 5 or 6? And how about the other guys that can make 4? Silicon, germanium, tin. So yes, that's a true statement, but I don't know that that's all that special about carbon. You hit at one of the most important things about carbon, the connection with life. While organic chemistry is not the chemistry of living things, it is true that the chemistry of living things necessarily involves organic chemistry. Because biological molecules, almost all biological molecules, except for the most dominant molecule in your body. The most dominant molecule in your body, of course, is water, not organic. Other than water, almost all of the other molecules in your body are organic compounds. So there is a connection with life. We are a carbon-based creature, as are all the other creatures on this particular planet of ours. Which element is most like carbon? That's a Chem 139 question. Silicon. The guys in a given group in the periodic table are there because they behave similarly. So the element that's going to behave most like carbon is silicon. I remain a fan of the original Star Trek series. And there was one episode where Kirk and the boys were called to this planet because there was some creature that were eating the miners. And it turns out that they were mining these pure silicon nodules. It turns out that these silicon nodules were the eggs of a silicon-based creature on that planet. So whoever wrote that episode for Star Trek understood that if there was going to be a life form out there in the cosmos somewhere that wasn't carbon-based, silicon-based is the next logical choice. It's the element that behaves most like carbon. Okay, so the connection with life. Here's something else about carbon. And all these things we're talking about with carbon here are interrelated things. It has sort of a middle-of-the-road electronegativity. You know, let's say we have a bond between, say, sodium and chlorine. What sort of bond is that going to be? Ionic. Guys far apart on the periodic table, low electronegativity, high electronegativity, they're going to tend to form ionic bonds. Well, look where carbon is. Of the representative elements, which are these 8 groups, not counting the transitions and antitransitions, of the representative elements, he's smack dab in the middle. No doubt you learned in Chem 139 or whatever, 161, these guys tend to develop a +1 charge. They tend to develop a +2 charge. These guys tend to be +3, especially aluminum. Forget about the noble gases. These guys tend to be -1. These guys tend to be -2, especially oxygen. These guys, you know, they do a lot, but most commonly -3. How about these guys? What charge do these guys typically develop? Yes, that's a trick question. What charge do these guys typically develop? None, they don't. They typically don't have any ionic charges, which means that they form virtually exclusively covalent bonds. Covalent bonds. As we will see later in the second and third quarter, there are some ionic situations or close to it involving carbon, but for the most part, he forms covalent bonds, not ionic bonds. You take an ionic compound, you throw it in water, what typically happens? It dissociates into its constituent ions. You throw an organic compound, a carbon-containing compound, throw it in water, there aren't any ions for it to dissociate into. The compounds remain intact, which of course is a huge necessity in biological situations. We're aqueous based. If we want intact molecules, they have to be covalent molecules. If carbon is your dominant atom, your central atom, it's going to be covalent. They're not going to dissociate in water. So minimal electronegativity, which means virtually exclusively covalent bonding. All that is cool, but here is the single most important thing about carbon that I don't expect you to be aware of prior to showing up today. Carbon can form long chains of itself. By that I mean, we can have a carbon bonded to another carbon, 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 and so on. Very long chains. And yes, carbon can make 4 bonds, so this guy, a couple more carbons over here, so on and so on. It can make very long chains of itself, highly branched chains of itself. This is extremely important for 2 reasons. Number 1, it allows for a very large number of different molecules. Picture this for a while, ponder this. The number of known compounds that do not contain carbon are somewhere around 200,000. The number of known compounds that do contain carbon is somewhere around 12 to 15 million. Way more organic compounds and inorganic compounds. The vast majority of known compounds are organic compounds. So yes, we're restricting ourselves to one element must necessarily be involved, but we are nowhere near restricting ourselves in terms of compounds to study. Virtually every compound known to humanity, with a small subset of a couple 100,000, is an organic compound. And the reason why there are so many is because carbon can make these big long chains of itself. Let's say we stick a bromine on there. Here's a bromine. There's an organic compound. Well, let's move this bromine over here. There's a different organic compound. Let's keep that bromine there, but add another carbon. There's a different organic compound. So we can get all sorts of different compounds this way. That's why there are so many, because carbon can make long chains of itself. Who's next best at making long chains of itself? Silicon, but he's nowhere near carbon. Associated with the ability to make long chains of itself is the fact that we can have large, complex molecules. This ties us back into the life thing. I don't know about you, but I think of myself as a relatively complex creature. There are all sorts of things going on inside me that are difficult. Tiny little molecules can't do them. Big molecules are necessary to do the sorts of life processes that are going on inside each of us. You need a large, complex molecule to store, say, genetic information as an example. You need a large, complex molecule to make the big proteins that catalyze the reactions in your body as another example. Tiny little guys can't do it. Big guys are necessary to do it. The only way you're going to get big guys is if carbon is the central boy. Okay, that's enough for day one. My good friend Gina just walked in the room. This is Gina Chang. She's going to be an SI instructor. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the SI system. Supplemental instruction, I think, is what the SI stands for. It's sort of a super tutor kind of arrangement. We're very fortunate to have Gina. I shouldn't embarrass her by saying this, but I will. She was the top student in this course last year. She's excellent. You guys would be wise to take advantage of her. Leave me alone, bug her. So I'm going to turn over the last few minutes to Gina.
Hi, I'm Gina. I know a lot of you actually. So I'm going to pass this out and you can tell me what your availability is so I can figure out some SI sessions. There's that, and then I have these bright papers that have little cheat sheet stuff and resources, online resources, my contact information, and my other available hours. And then if you haven't already, the remind is up here and also on this paper. If you want to text me, I can remind you when your tests are, your quizzes, and then you can ask me questions on there too. Okay, so as your SI, I'm going to be working with Ted to find out certain topics that you guys might need more help with. Yeah. And then we'll have one SI session dedicated to homework/lab help. And then the other one will be a topic that Ted and I choose. If you guys have any questions, you can ask me now or text me later. And then, yeah.
Where do you think you're going to kind of want the steps in there? Is there any other
There's a conference room across from the STEM Center, probably there somewhere. After you guys fill that out, you can just, when you leave, put it up here.
And not to interrupt it, I basically said you're welcome to come to either lab regardless of what you're registered for. I would like to request during this first week, if possible, attend the lab that you're registered for. because we need to check into a drawer, and it just kind of helps our bookkeeping a little bit. If that's not possible for whatever reason, we'll deal with it. But if it is possible, this first week.